Because when I'm hunting, I'm like, dog training is stupid. It's like, okay, I got to get back to it. I got to get back to launchers and check cords and all those things they do matter and they're important. But when it's January, they are the last thing in the world that I'm thinking of. And like, if you're a trainer, in my opinion, like you should earn your bona fides. You should absolutely go test and trial dogs, whether they're yours or your client's dog. It's more important for the trainer to achieve objective standards than the dog, in my opinion. Do I think you need to do it in order to be good? No. Do I think meeting objective standards is an important part of being good? Yes. If you want the level of respect that I think most human beings want sitting in a room with their peers, then make yourself a peer. We are a meritocracy. There's zero barrier to entry to become a professional dog trainer. For gun dog trainers that are looking at that side of the fence and feeling maybe a tinge of jealousy, you shouldn't. That is a harder lifestyle. I think those people are earning that $2,500 per week or whatever it is they're charging. It's just not the same. You got to go put vinyl wrap on your new Sprinter van and go park it at the place you don't want to be that day and play the game. For every gun dog client out there or trainer out there should think of their absolute hardest client to deal with and then recognize that would be every client at a minimum that they would have.
That's a good point.
I was selling a couple of puppies to a police dog vendor that's a friend of mine. And we're talking about my Springer pup too. And there's, I don't think it's a burgeoning popularity, but there's always been kind of a secondary popularity amongst some detection trainers as far as Springers are concerned compared to labs. For dogs that kind of come out of the gun dog market into that space. And I was just explaining how I liked my Springer and thought that they would make good detection dogs. And he mentioned, they tend to be really high drive, but also high arousal, and that sometimes can be a little problem. And when I pressed him to kind of explain it, he struggled, which we all do. We all use terms that like we're not quite sure where they fit in, but they make sense in the conversation in the moment. So I've come home and done a little research on that and kind of like arousal versus high drive versus energetic and hyperactive, or and I think it is a good term. So I'm planning to do my own podcast on that one, but essentially arousal, and I'm not prepared for this, but like when I looked it up just to define it, was like in a state of alertness in regards to, things we might call drive, and this language is often very sexualized language, but if you consider the fact that that's a normal biological drive, then it makes sense. It's the stuff we tend to use. That's the context in which we hear it a lot. But so for me personally, like right now, I'm kind of considering like a high arousal dog, a dog that it has a low threshold to come into drive, is always prepared and waiting for that trigger, where it's almost preemptive. It's almost as if the dog is initiating the activity versus us triggering some, and the drive in some way. And we're, usually for us, we're thinking of prey drive or food drive or something like that. But that's the case. And I'm, and in regards to companion gun dogs, which is my little brand,
right.
It makes a lot of sense. So it's like, what I would, in a perfect world, we would have a high drive, low arousal dog.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I think, what everybody's kind of saying when on switch, off switch. We want to be able to control it, right?
That's it. I mean, so we all, again, it's so much of especially what I do in my own podcast is try to take these terms that we all throw around willy-nilly and, there's a lot of shades of gray, and really distill them down and define them and try to create kind of a clear understanding of what it is we're trying to say that way. So,
and it's always fun to try and take our general thoughts, maybe summarize a little too much, kind of what you're talking about. We have terms for it, but then we don't really know how to articulate the thought process behind it.
Sure.
And so that's what I like about your podcast is sometimes you'll go on there and like, guys, I'm working this out as I'm
yeah, most times I am. It's kind of my little, and it's a great, it really is a kind of a great process for me. Yeah, like, because if I turn on record, then it kind of forces me to sit still and be in my own head for an hour, where it's so easy to be distracted. But when you put the mic in front of your face and you hit record, it's like, I'm here. I don't want to do any more takes. I don't want to quit on this thing. So I'm going to turn off the world and really sit here and be with my own thoughts while I'm working this out with my audience.
Have you done any of those that when you shut off, I know you probably second guess every one that you do after you do it, but has there been one that you're like, you know what, that was just straight garbage. I'm not releasing that.
Well, yeah, I mean, only once, and it was more about the context. I was trying to do it like on the porch of the cabin one day. I got in my head that like, dude, this is the time that I break away to, where I'm not, okay, I'm going to break this hour off. I'm not going to be feeding or airing or training dogs. I'm sitting by myself and I'm like, I should be somewhere I want to be. And so I went and did it like on the porch of the cabin, and I just found it too distracting. And I was just like, I couldn't think doing it. And then I was like, I'm going to do it in a canoe. Like I'm sure it'll be the exact, one day I'm going to visit that. Now that I've added a little, video element to it. I published my very first one on YouTube, and it's got an astounding like 14 views at this point in a week.
I love it, man. I think our space needs more of that stuff.
Yeah.
Especially the video. Like, I'm proud of you to taking it to the next level.
Me, man.
It's like just getting you to record an audio podcast consistently. I was proud of you, and then when you finally release one on video, I'm like, yes, there we go. We're actually taking steps forward in the community.
Now it's like I'm gonna get the little action cam, figure out an audio setup, and we're gonna go do it from the canoe at some point in the near future. As soon as the weather warms up a little bit. But yeah, that's where my head's been.
Is that how you typically do your creative process? You just kind of see what strikes you, and then if you're in the mood to work things out, you'll hit record. But if not, you're not going to force it just to get another episode out.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what I've learned about myself. I if you're going to monetize these things at all, or if you're going to grow a big enough audience to have a quote unquote successful podcast, I think consistency is really important. And it's something I've struggled with the whole time because I want to bring things to the table. And I see all these wonderful topics, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a list, and then I'm going to hit them up. But then if I'm uninspired, then it doesn't matter. But like this arousal versus drive thing, like I've been in my head about it legitimately for like 2 weeks, and it's in spare time. I'm like, I'm looking, it's a lot of online research, but picking up a book here and there that just happens to be laying on the shelf, seeing if I can find it somewhere, anybody describing it. And so I'm just kind of self-educating as I'm going, and I'm thinking of where these topics rub up against one another. And then I'll sit down at some point and go, okay, these are my, I haven't put the whole thing together. I haven't really formulated, or formed an argument for why one is more important than the other.
I mean, there's literally been episodes while you're forming your argument. It's like you kind of go, you're arguing with yourself.
Yeah, well, what'll happen is I'll end up catching myself like making a point that I didn't intend to make, and it changes my entire
thought process.
Changes the point I was trying to make.
Mm-hmm.
Then it happens almost every show for me. Like that's just because it is. That's like I said, that everything is on the fly. I'm doing it like as it pops in my mind. Let me look this up. Let me define this term. Let me read into this a little bit. And I'm always doing it in a 5-minute chunk here and a 15-minute chunk there. And then when it's finally ready to sit down and distill it out, the hour I have where I put the blinders on is when I'm actually sitting down to record. And I kind of enjoy that part of it. I think, my intent is not necessarily to come across as any more or less authentic than anybody else, but I think that's what ends up happening.
Absolutely. I would say that because if anybody's listening or finding this interesting at all, it's as somebody who I've been doing this show for almost 6 years now, and I've done very few solo things. I don't like it. I think it's something that I could grow to enjoy, but also I just enjoy the back and forth and playing off of other people. That's my thing. But I think a lot of people that have never actually like put a camera or a microphone on themselves and try to formulate their thought process around something, it can be, I don't know, vulnerability. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but it's like, it can be off-putting. You have to kind of get used to that, and the fact that you just keep doing it over and over again. I'm like, I'm just going to pick a topic, and we'll see what I feel about it after I riff on it in my own head.
I mean, if I was actually trying to do it in front of an audience, I think it would be problematic. Like if I was trying to lecture a crowd and feeling that unprepared. But I mean, there's times I'm sure there's a crossover audience here to some degree. But there's a couple episodes where I've just been like, man, I am a bumbling idiot right now. And like, I don't edit or anything else, so they're catching all that when I contradict myself, and I think that's a normal part of the human
We all
experience.
do it.
Right. Yeah.
Anybody that's watching or critiquing any podcast or any person, especially doing solo stuff, it's like, look inward. I guarantee you do the same thing. That's how we're supposed to construct our thoughts, right?
The worst for me is my grammar. Like if I go back and I hear myself say something, just constantly, it just coming off not sounding not the way I intend to sound in my brain. My brain, I'm like, boy, I sure am articulate and bright. And then I listen to myself back and I'm just like saying dumb shit.
Yeah. Oh, when I'm going back and editing and putting my stuff together, I don't know how anybody listens to me. I don't think anybody's supposed to listen to themselves talk half as much as what I hear myself talk. I'm with you. I'm like, man, shut up.
Self-flagellation.
Yeah. But the topic thing is interesting because, let's be honest, we're in such a small community.
Sure.
And because we have such a wide base of interest, what appeals to us, there's like different flavors throughout the year. So I have this ongoing topic list, like you were talking about, write it down. And by the time I get to some of them, I'm on to another flavor and I'll just keep it written and maybe I'll revisit it or whatnot. But it's, I do get asked sometimes, how do you keep coming up with topics? And it's like, well, after 5.5, 6 years, it gets tough coming up with some new things. And so until you actually start really weighing and reconsidering some of these random topics, if you're a dog nerd, that's what intrigues me. And it's interesting to just kind of get new thoughts when it comes to all of this instead of just recycling the same ones over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, I've got more hours of myself out there than I ever probably intended to in the first place. But there's redundancy, and then there's recognizing that like you've changed and you've grown and you've got new thoughts and things. But this is something I believe I really enjoy following. Oh gosh, what's the guy's name now? I can't think about it. Rick Rubin, right? Mm-hmm. Like I love all his social stuff. I love his ideas about things, but it's like he doesn't do anything for his audience. Mm-hmm. He's like, you don't make anything with the sale in mind and what the audience is going to think about it. You just do it for yourself. You do the thing you like the most, and then you put it out in the world, and it either hits or it doesn't. And for him, there's money to be had in that space by doing it that way, and that's his process. For me, at least at this point, and most likely for the rest of my life, there will be no money in this. But I do think that what I get in return in terms of being able to sit down and talk on the subjects that I thought deeply on is worth it for me. And so when we talk about that kind of cyclical stuff, I don't mind a little bit of the redundancy because, at the end of the day, if people don't listen to it, it really is not that big a deal for me, but I hope they do, and I hope they get something out of it. But there's times where, I'm like, man, I have said that 15 times in my podcast, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Well, you're naturally going to have some repetitiveness to it. Again, there's only so many different avenues you can go down the path.
Sure.
You can always circle back, get some new perspective or some guests to talk on the same deal. But that's what I find intriguing about yours, and just hit record and let's roll.
Well, and it's like you said, if I don't have, and I have forced a couple of them, and I've learned not to do it at this point. Finally, if you listen to, there's a 6 or 8 episode span where I'm like, okay, guys, I'm really focused. I'm going to try and get one out every other week, and then finally, like on episode 8, I'm like, okay, I'm not doing that. This doesn't work for me. Yeah, so it does. It requires inspiration. It requires me to actually, and so I'm not going to record something at this point, now, if I don't have that. And sometimes it's just a check-in. Sometimes that helps me too. Like, my last episode was just, I finished the hunting season. It was, I hadn't done an episode in probably 4 months, and I was just like, hey, I'm still alive. I'm still enjoying myself, and there's this kind of affirmative thing, this affirmation I do, which is like, hey, I'm looking back on my hunting season in such gratitude, right? Because it's like, this is why, okay, now I'm a hunter again. And I think for me, that never gets old. I've never been tired of hunting. and I've never been tired of being a dog trainer. And so when it's time to sit down and do a podcast, it's like I always feel like there's something to express. I may not know exactly what it is, but it's less about the material and more about the expression. Like I need to express that I'm grateful that I got to spend 38 days stomping around the woods in my in my backyard.
Getting back to the roots of what you
Yeah.
love about all this.
Yeah.
You say you don't really get tired of being a dog trainer. How long ago was it that you decided to be a dog trainer? Maybe not when you put the shingle out, but
Yeah.
when you were like, okay, I actually want to pursue this as an actual skill set and profession.
It was sometime in the summer of 2019, I think.
Okay.
So I was, I'd always been kind of fascinated by dogs, but I've told this story is redundant, but it's, I was in the military. I was a corpsman, which is a medic in the Navy, but serving with the Marine Corps. And I was working at the Scout Sniper School. And, long story short, we got visited by the MPs. At that time, you didn't have all the cool special operations canine handlers in the world out there. This was pre what they would call the MPC program. So the military policemen came out, they brought their dogs, and in a demo, they let me put the sleeve on and take a bite from a dog, and it was over from that moment forward. So I was out. I had an Malinois puppy a couple of weeks later. Schutz Club.
You dove right in.
Dove right in, and have been completely ate up with it ever since. My interests have changed, but the general theme of being a dog trainer has not changed since that day.
What about the landscape as a dog trainer? If you think about it when you decided to do it,
yeah.
Fast forward 5 years or so now, you said 2019, so 6 years, I guess. What, is it everything you thought it was going to be? Did it turn out how you thought it was going to be?
I meant 1999.
I was wondering. I'm like, I'm pretty sure. So
yeah, I did that. I'm still learning to write 2025 on checks right now.
I was like, all right, maybe he was just part-time training there for a little while. So okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Spans a few decades, a couple of decades in there. Yeah, so that was 1999.
All right, so we're 26 years.
26 years.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah,
so
removed.
So compare the landscape of you put your shingle out in 1999 to now it's 2025. I want to, that's a lot of time span right there in the world.
I didn't truly hang a shingle, like at least in its current form, until 2015.
Okay.
I was in the military at that time. I never started a business, but I started going to club days and competing with my dog. So to me, and I've always said this too, like there are, a lot of my friends are pro dog trainers. A lot of my friends are in the industry, so to speak. But some of the best dog trainers I know are accountants and plumbers and lawyers. I mean, like that's their hobby, and they are. Nothing can be taken away from them in regards to their skill and talent as trainers. And so for me, I was a dog trainer at that time. I was not in the business of dog training necessarily. But then intermittently, I trained, obedience dogs to start. I went and worked for a police dog vendor for a few years, but it was always in and out, in between, wearing a monkey suit and trying to have real jobs. And so, that went till I want to say 2011. I finally decided to go in full time, and I went and worked for a defense contractor training bomb dogs. But to get to the original question, yeah, I mean, back then there was an internet in 1999. But for all those kids out there, it was a whole lot different internet than the one we have today.
Al Gore compared to Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, I mean, it was if getting information, it was still easier in ways to get information from books. It was dial up, or wherever you happen to be. It was neat, but the earlier adopters, there used to be a site called like Dr. P's Working Dog, something or other. That guy had just put up a ton of references. And, it's just very old school. I don't know anything about tech, so I'm sure I could explain this from if Nate Zarnota was here, he could tell us about all the coding and stuff and how that worked. But, Learberg, who is still around today, was a player. He was a mail order business back then, though.
Okay.
So you got him in like the back of magazines. So a lot magazines were a big deal. And so, and I mean, you're nerding out on all this stuff. I'm sure, like, if there's any young guys out here that are nerding out on us today, for me, it was like Working Dog magazine. It was pre my hunting dog infatuation. But even like going to the, grocery store and picking up a copy of Dog Fancy, just anything to absorb some dog information. Um, and books at that time. But yeah, Learberg's a guy named Ed Frawley who's still got a pretty, he's got a information-based business. You go on his website, you see he's got Michael Ellis does all his videos through and things. But yeah, I ordered a VHS tape of how to do Schutzend before I ever went to club day, and like a bite or a scratch suit, and a whip and a sleeve. And it was me and my Malinois in the backyard on a back tie, me doing all the early bite work based on what I was seeing on that VHS tape. And yeah, I think Tom Rose had a book back then, and that was it. That was the landscape. That was where you got your information from back in those days until you could find people. And then it was, here's a good theme for this conversation, but it was getting to club, like meeting people for real. Because yeah, I think we've lost a lot. As easy as it is to get information, like back then you were really forced to seek mentorship in a way I don't think you are today. Like there's just so much information available. You can, and I mean I train a lot alone now, but I never did back then. Like once I got into the club culture, and then travel and meeting new people and going to seminars and all those things, that was so important. And I just don't think if I were 19 today that I would feel as compelled to go seek that firsthand knowledge the way I was back then.
I wonder if it's because of how connected we are now, to where you want to connect with somebody, just pull up Facebook, Instagram, like you can shoot them a DM. There's no networking. There's no, hey, I've got a buddy over here, maybe I'll link you up. I mean, there's still some of that, of course, sure. But for the most part, people want to access. It's like you reference people nerding out on us, my show or any of these other shows. They can just hit message and just shoot us a message now immediately. There's no, mail in. There's no, do you know so-and-so? You can just access them immediately.
And that was it. I mean, the whole purpose behind my podcast in the first place was a reference for like clients. So I do, my group and individual lessons, and I was catching, I'm such a windbag that like instead of actually putting a leash in their hand and doing stuff, I'd be like, oh crap, we got 5 minutes left in the lesson and I haven't shut up. And we've never taught them anything other than me talking. So I made the podcast so I could be like, hey, go listen to this episode. Yeah, go listen to this, go listen to that. That way we can actually spend the time here we have together doing practical application stuff. And so yeah, now, anybody can put in their earbuds and get countless hours of not just me, but any number of, trainers out there in the world.
The information's out there it's at your fingertips.
There is no secret left.
Right.
There's no like, and that's something I kind of miss too, was the mystery, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I remember I heard about force fetch for a decade before I ever decided to do it.
Really?
Yeah, like it was just this only, the sacred knowledge that the elders had. Yeah,
force fetch.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, I mean, just now you really can. You can go look up Bob's course and probably do a pretty dang good job.
Yeah.
If you're willing to take a few risks on your own. So I think it's always better to have somebody there in person with you, but we don't always have that option. So yeah, I mean, it is a different world in many ways for the better. And for me though, like I'm very nostalgic, so I tend to romanticize the past. And I'm sure I'm looking at it through rose-colored glasses, but I miss a lot of, what we couldn't have back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like you're curious about it, you search it, but you still can't find the help with the application. Everybody can study it, they can hear it, but until you actually see it in person, or you hold the leash in your hands, or you have somebody to critique you on your timings off here or there. But even that, to some extent, people can just throw up a video, catch it, message it to somebody. So, I mean, when it comes to dealing with the client that comes out here for the one-on-one lesson, or you're coaching them from afar,
yeah,
I know you're nostalgic from, yesteryear, but
sure.
It's had to maybe given you some more options in terms of like actually, I don't know, diversifying how you make a living as a trainer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not great at that. So what I find is like, I've tried a million ways in my brain where I'm like, okay, I'm going to monetize all these. I'm going to have multiple income streams.
And there's pros and cons to each one.
Yeah, I mean, the income streams that work for me are my board and trains and my lessons. Like at the end of the day, those are the things that just make sense to me, and I don't feel like I'm cheating anybody when I take money for them. Not to say and if I do a remote lesson, I don't feel bad about like monetizing that. I'm taking the time and I'm giving those people my best effort. But yeah, when we're standing next to each other and the dog's on lead, and I take it for a second and I hand the lead to you and I watch and that you cannot. There's no substitute for tactile sensation, the feel of a dog on the end of a leash, and to have somebody there to see it all in real time and to be able to experience that those tactile sensations with you. I mean, that's irreplaceable.
Mm-hmm.
So there will never, nothing can ever take the place of that. Now that being said, I think the fact that it is a lot easier to get information, and if somebody's willing to take the time and effort to deal with a little bit of their own trial and error, there's a lot more information now that they have to make decisions based on the knowledge they can obtain in other ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
To shift. So it's good. I'm glad it's out there. I think there are more good dog trainers today than there were back then.
With more knowledge, there should be.
Yeah, I just do think that the dog training field has continued to move forward. That said, though, it's like all things, that especially sports, things change in athletics a lot, but a good football player in 1970 would probably be a good football player today. Now, there's obviously some things that are different from back then till now. But yeah, I mean, you can only change so much. The principles are still the same.
Right. Everything is built off of the people that came before us. That's why I find it interesting, whether it's dog training or it's everything in life.
Yeah.
We're improving based off of the stuff before us. That's why I don't have a whole lot of patience for the people that are like, well, so and so didn't need any changing. You could say that about anything.
Yeah. I mean, no. Well, the thing is, the bar keeps getting, push the bar up. I mean, we create a new standard. And I guess when I say a football player from 70 would have been a good football player today, in the context of today, like, you know what I mean? If that person was exposed to they didn't have the sports medicine they had.
I was about to say the nutrition.
Yeah, all those things.
The tools. I mean, even just the weight equipment that they use nowadays.
Now, that being said, too, we've lost something with instant replay. We've lost something. You know what I mean? It's like
took the human element out of it.
And that was the whole. I guess the whole point of this topic to me is like that is a reoccurring theme to me, which is what's more important. Achieving this kind of certain metric of success that's the modern metric, or the experience of just the general experience that we share with people across the generations.
Mm-hmm.
The hunting with our dog, and so that's always a big just a big deal for me. And moving out of hunting season and into what I call training season, I kind of change hats. I'm a hunter. Yeah, I need February to kind of detox, right? From not
come back down to earth,
figuratively and literally, But I need it to go back to being a dog trainer again. Because when I'm hunting, I'm like, dog training is stupid. We said all that up in Michigan,
right?
And now it's like, okay, I got to get back to it. I got to get back to launchers and check cords and all those things they do matter and they're important, but. When it's January, they are the best thing in the world that I'm thinking of, and so.
What's it like coming back down to earth, the real world, as a trainer? Because then your daily chores, and a lot of people think, oh, you're training dogs, you're just playing with dogs all day. It's there's a reason why you get paid. Definitely
not that, and I mean that was that's always a big topic of conversation between me and my fellow professional trainers out there. Is I have chosen to keep things very small and simple. And for that reason, I don't keep a ton of dogs in training. I focus on pet obedience and I focus on the gun dog work. And it's a very holistic approach to training, but I can't take 20 dogs and do that. And, so for me, like, if I'm over max capacity at 6 or 7 dogs, it's seven, I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. But it's very manageable otherwise. I mean, and a lot of pros would hear me say 7 dogs and be like, psh, that's nothing, right? But I'm also trying to exist with them. I'm spending time just making sure they're getting just individual dog time. And so it's not, and that's not to knock those guys. I mean, they're getting great work done at a high pace and staying busy all the time. But when you got that many dogs, you need help. You can't do it. There's no possible way whatsoever. And so for me personally, it's what I can accomplish alone. And so for that reason, there's not much of a shift. I mean, I've always got a couple of client dogs, even through the hunting season, that I'm either going to work on wild birds, or like this year I had a dog that was gun shy, and I knew I knew the dog would turn the corner, but he was not ready to go home when it was time to go home. And so he stuck around for another 6 weeks and left bird crazy, being shot over and all that stuff. And that's always, to me, that's a good feeling, but it complicates it when I got to deal, still got to take care of that guy before I go, guide a hunt or do whatever, during the day. So,
I gotta imagine adding in the companion dog side, like you said, it almost forces you to take less dogs because you're spending more time with each individual dog every day. It's not the same thing as going back to the trainer with 20 dogs ready to go. You set up a field session, then you just assembly line, run them through it, call it a day, repeat the next day. You actually have to take some time and do some obedience stuff. Is that a drastic change from when you started training years ago to now? Because, I mean, it seems like that the companion side almost trumps the field work side for the average person overall nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah. When I started, I was like, I just didn't even know that this was an option. I mean, what a gun dog trainer was, what a hunting dog trainer was a guy with a minimum of 20 kennels that were always full, or you were scared. And you're on the conveyor belt, or I was anyway. And I never wanted to be a big operation even back then. So if I had help, it was one. I kept one helper around. But it was busy. Those were busy days, and it wasn't getting on. One thing I think I recognized is like, I had done so much pet obedience prior, and I wanted to help people with that, and I could make a very obedient dog. And this kind of gets back to the arousal versus drive deal. It's like, but 9 times out of 10, when that door's popping during the day, you're coming out to do a setup. You're coming out and drive. So you're always training and drive. And so one thing that's really important, in my opinion, in dealing with companion dogs is you just need to chill out and be a dog. Like, you just need to lay down and go to sleep in my presence, which is rare, if I'm doing 20 dogs at a time.
Right.
You go to sleep on the truck. That's fine if you want to, or you don't have to, but it doesn't matter. When the door opens, we're going to work.
Yeah, you're immediately getting thrown in the field with birds and then getting thrown right back in the box.
And a lot of times now it's just, I'm going to pull you out. We're going to walk out to the field like we're going to do something. You're not going to do anything. I'm going to sit in a lawn chair and, read a book or stare at my phone while you just chill.
Which, think about it from a hunter's perspective. You're not always in action when hunting, right? And I think I've been in the field. I'm not even talking about some dogs, but some people that they almost can't make it from action to action. Sure. It's like they become restless and anxious. You want to talk about the frantic dog? We can attribute that to the people just as much as the dogs.
And I don't want to come off. One thing I hate when I listen to podcasts is like some guy telling me why the other guys are good, right? Like, this is not me pitch. This is just my gig. Yeah. And I don't think it's necessarily better. I think you can have a dog with a higher volume trainer, especially the guys that are keeping dogs for much longer and rolling from hunt test to hunt test, and an even keeled animal. But that's my focus is really more just on the person that doesn't have an ambition of having a titled dog. I mean, maybe they do, and if they do, I want to help them achieve that objective. But I'm not campaigning dogs for anybody. I'm not keeping them long term. It's a short term gig. It's getting them. The whole premise is I want to make something you can take hunting safely. Hopefully, bring out as much of that dog's natural, you know, talent as possible, and then also, keep put a general compliance mindset on the animal. So it's when you pick it up, it's a compliant dog that knows when to be well mannered and when to cut loose and go try to find birds. And when it finds birds, has a pretty good idea what to do with them, but is not gonna. You're not ready to take it to a senior, even. And then if you do want that beyond that, then that's why I'm here as a coach for you, and less of a board and train situation.
Has that conversation changed over the years with when a client calls you out of the blue just trying to get a feel for what your kennel's about? Have you noticed what that just blue or green collar that you've never met before, have you noticed their priorities or how they look at things or ask about things? Has that shifted as society's kind of changed?
Yeah, I mean, I have to set expectations early, and that's a big part of it because, we none of us know what we don't know. Um, but I end up talking a lot of people out of coming to me, like, and I'm fine with that. I want to.
You want the right customer.
Well, I want to know what their objectives are, but more importantly, I want them to know what their objectives are. And it's just like, what's your definition of a finished dog? Everybody has a different idea of what a finished dog is. To some people, there are FCs out there that aren't finished. And to other people, there are dogs that'll go pick up a single mark and bring it back to you, and spit it on the ground, and that's a finished dog. And the answer is, it's really subjective. It's what are your objectives? What do you want out of the experience? And a lot of people are like, well, I want to go, I want to go to Michigan next year, and I really want my dog to handle grouse. And it's like, wait, I can't teach your dog to handle grouse. Like, what I can do is give it an idea of what a bird is. I can give it an idea of what it's supposed to do when it finds it, to some degree, and we can get it comfortable with gunfire, and we can do our best to kind of help mold that dog into a hunter. But nothing is going to make it a grouse dog outside of grouse, right? And nothing's going to make it a woodcock dog except for woodcock. Nothing's going to make it a pheasant dog, and so on and so forth. And so if that's your objective, let's get you to a place where you're safe to go experience that, and your dog is ready to absorb that experience and to grow from it. But you don't need a broke dog to go do that. And I'm not helping you by breaking your dog out. What you need, what you want out of the experience is to go have a good hunter. Honestly, if I make him steady to wing shot and fall before he's ever seen a wild bird, there's a good chance I'm kind of muddying the water for that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so a lot of the conversation I have early is that conversation. You don't, so if what you're looking for is that high level polish, being built from start to finish in the Piedmont of North Carolina, I'm not your guy.
Yeah.
But a lot of people come on board, and so this is where that kind of spills into my hunting season, where it's like, hey, let me take your dog, and then let's you and I get together during the hunting season, and let me take you out, and we're going to hunt wild birds, and now we're going to bring the whole experience together. And then at the end of that, if you decide, okay, now I want to go challenge a UT, or now I want to go put a master hunter, then we can talk. If I need to take them back for a while and get you over a specific hump, I can do that. But still, I think you're better off you being the lead on the training in that, and you the client.
How's the resume building shifted throughout the decades since you've been involved? Would you say that there's just as much emphasis or priority on papers now as there were before? Or, as people come in and they're emphasizing the companion side of it just as much, if not more, than the hunting side of it, how would you say our games and trials have kept up with that?
Do you mean in terms of titling your dogs?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a trainer, like if you're a trainer, in my opinion, like you should earn your bona fides, right? Like you should absolutely go test and trial dogs, whether they're yours or your client's dogs. I think it's more important for the trainer to achieve objective standards than the dog, in my opinion. because it just shows that you're willing to work outside of your comfort zone to achieve an
and
impact.
have your work critiqued
And have your work critiqued. There are a lot of there are plenty of trainers out there that would, and I'm not saying they're not talented. Like I think there's some extremely skilled and talented trainers out there that have not done that. And it's not necessarily that that's a hole in their game, but if they're going to if they're going to exist in the meritocracy that is dog training, they're going to be missing that part of their game, right? And so yeah, do I think you need to do it in order to be good? No. Do I think meeting objective standards is an important part of being good? Yes. So I'm contradicting myself as I always do.
It happens.
But no, but I think yeah. I mean, I don't I don't think you need to play college ball to go into the pros and make an impact. But I think for some people, it's really important that they do that. But I guess my suggestion to any aspiring pro trainer would just be like, hey, do something with your dogs. Like if you don't do it for your client dogs, that's fine. But you're gonna have a hard time. I think what your peers think of you is important, and you're gonna find yourself in situations where you're gonna either disagree with somebody or you're gonna be existing in and amongst your peers. And if you want the level of respect that I think most human beings want sitting in a room with their peers, then make yourself a peer. I mean, there's no better way to say that. And that's not to say, again, it's not a critique of either side of that. It's just yeah, I mean, we are a meritocracy. There's zero barrier to entry to become a professional dog trainer. You just simply exist and say you're a dog trainer and take money for it, and voila, you're a professional dog trainer. So it's what do you want out of the experience? And if what you want out of the experience is to kind of grow, then I think, take something on and accomplish something objectively.
Mm-hmm. For the person considering becoming a trainer and hanging the shingle out, how do you start wrapping your head around a fair price? So much time goes into this day in, day out. You don't have your bona fides. Some people care about this, a lot of not others. How do you actually come up with a fair price, especially in a market that, again, seems to change every so often with priorities in terms of the average person or potential client?
I think first thing you got to do is, you can't be a pro if you can't cover the nut.
Right.
So like that's number one. Like can you afford to eat?
Right. Can you keep the lights on?
Yeah, can you keep the lights on? So you got to charge no matter what, no matter how bad you are. Objectively, you got to charge enough to make a living. I think you learn as you get into this. It's a lot of this. I mean, reputation is, I don't know necessarily from the inside looking out, even what my own reputation is amongst my peers, but what I do know is it is important to me. I care what they think. And so, I think it's important to not come out and just undercut everybody immediately as deeply as you possibly can. So I think you need to pay some attention to the market. And I think you need to kind of respect it in that regard. It's an easy thing to do is to say, I'm going to come in and be cheaper than everybody else. But if you're not prepared to do a good job for your clients, you're not doing anybody any favors in that regard. But as far as as far as the market's concerned and setting your price, I think you just look at what it, like for me, it's just what do I want lifestyle wise and what do I want out of my job? And I have to be able to charge enough to keep my family somewhat comfortable, which I mean it's a modest lifestyle for us to some degree, but also keep my work life and home life in balance and do a good job for my clients. Do what I sell them, make sure that I'm not selling them short.
Yeah. Something that I've kind of found interesting over the past couple of years is it seems to be like there's a diverging path when it comes to dog training prices. Like if you look in the hunting dog world, it seems to be like here's a general threshold for what people are willing to accept and pay.
Sure.
And then pet dogs, you go outside the hunting dog world and you see what those guys make.
Sure.
And it's like, wow, it's amazing how much work and time you almost have to put in, or at least resources or overhead on gun dogs as opposed to a pet dog in a garage. Would you say that like the hunting dog space, it's this is a really subjective question, but has the hunting dog training kept up with modern dog training as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a loaded question. So I think the gun dog market is more honest. And I don't mean that the trainers are the obedience trainers are dishonest, but it's a very like dog eat dog world out there in that game.
Yeah.
There are like, I mean, if you've been around for say 10 years, 10 years ago there was an industry leading franchise. Since that industry leading franchise, there have been 7 or 8 different, maybe every other year, kind of is the rotation. Shifts of new industry leading franchises, and they're all gone at this point, right? And so longevity, I think, is very hard in that world. And, I mean, there are very good independent trainers out there. They kind of do what I've got a great buddy that, he's not at the top of the market. He makes a good living as a pet dog trainer. It's what I will say for gun dog trainers that are looking at that side of the fence and feeling maybe a tinge of jealousy. I think you shouldn't, because I think that is a harder lifestyle. I think those people are earning that, that 2,500 per week or whatever it is they're charging. It's just not the same. You got to go put vinyl wrap on your new Sprinter van and go park it at the place you don't want to be that day, and play the game. And deal with for every gun dog client out there or trainer out there should think of their absolute hardest client to deal with, and then recognize that would be every client at a minimum that they would have.
That's a good point.
Just the quality of,
because you're not even just dealing with the pet dogs by themselves. I mean, they're dogs. We can figure out the dogs, but you're dealing with dogs. They've never been told no.
Sure.
There's no drive. They've never had to work for anything. So, but as trainers, we can overcome that. What you can't overcome are the owners that made them that way, and you're handing that dog right back to them.
Yes, and what that market has set for an expectation for communication, right? Like, you're going to be
everyday pictures and videos and
pictures
updates.
And video updates, all that stuff. That very involved. Not to say that you shouldn't be involved with your clients, but I set ground rules essentially, like from the get go. Like, I'm going to call you on Fridays, and I don't text.
So weekly update.
Yeah, I'm going to do my best to snap you a picture here and there. And I always tell them, like, you're never going to insult me asking for pictures. And I understand, like, okay, Mama wants her pictures of the baby. Like, that's
right.
Fine. Just be patient with me. I'm on the back 40 and I'm working. And
I forget what one trainer told me. It's like, well, do you want me taking pictures? Or do you want me training your dog?
Yeah, and there's a lot. And I would say, from a vetting perspective, we just have clients that understand that immediately because they have objectives. There's something they actually want to accomplish with their dog. It's not a thing to fix in their dog. It's they have a goal that they want to meet, and they recognize like that you are a subject matter expert in that area, and you're going to, it's time to cut Fido loose and let him grow up with you. It's like, it really is more like sending your kid off to summer camp to grow, not to be hovered over. Right. And I would say, if you're making that comparison, it's the difference between sending your kid to wrestling camp and to daycare.
Right.
It is, it's like when I send my kid to wrestling camp, if I ever do one day, it's like, I don't want to hear back.
Yeah.
I want to see him at the end of the thing.
They should be busy developing a skill
and he should also be under the tutelage of some other man out there, absorbing what that person has to offer. And he doesn't need me being over involved. I'm not helping in that scenario. And I think gun dog clients recognize that they're like, they don't need to inject themselves into the situation. Now, but of course, at the end of the day, like it's appropriate for me to field questions and to make people happy and to do those things to whatever degree that makes sense. But it's also important for me to say, hey, if you really want this to happen, you got to trust me. You got to trust, I hate the word process in this context, but you got to trust that there's a process, that I've got his best interest in mind. And sometimes that's going to mean some discomfort for that dog. Like, and I mean, like in the context of life, maybe if he's gun shy, maybe or whatever, maybe a few nights in the kennel are what's best for him. Even though I'm set up to keep him in my home, there's time. Maybe he needs to go connect with his more ancestral.
I'm a dog.
I'm a dog roots, and people tend to understand that where you just couldn't get away with that kind of stuff necessarily. And you have to be careful. You have to, as long as you got to keep your ethical boundaries. You can't do it because it's easier for you. You can't do it out of laziness. You got to do it because it works and it matters and it's real. You have to, if you're going to operate a business on your own, I am, you can't be lazy. You got to get up. You got to do the thing every day. Mm-hmm. You don't look at it as an easy way to make a living, because there's a lot easier ways to make a living.
Well, let's go into that, balancing it to where, okay, I love dogs. I like training dogs. I'm passionate about it. I'm interested in it. Now it's a business.
Yeah.
There's a different vibe to it now.
Yeah.
You're relying on it. To your point, you have to get up every single day. This isn't, you have your dog or two that if you skip a day, not a big deal.
Yeah.
You're charging people for that time.
Yes.
At the kid at wrestling camp. How do you balance that without burning yourself out, without getting frustrated, understanding that the clients are going to be clients and, long-term thinking, you need that repeat business. Just talk to me about putting your business cap on as a dog trainer as opposed to let's just grab a check cord and go run dogs.
Yeah. I mean, so for me, the simple answer is keeping it small. Right. And like there are guys that can operate at a much higher level. Mm-hmm. But my personality, like who I am as a human being, like I just can't overburden myself, or the quality's going to fall off. It's a guarantee. But I can keep my quality really high and I can keep myself entertained as long as I don't feel overwhelmed. The moment I feel overwhelmed, then that's when the burnout kicks in for me, but, I get my day looks the exact same every day. I'm up at 5, I air the dogs, I wake up my kid, I get to this affords me the opportunity to make breakfast for my kid every morning, spend that 1 hour before he and his mom split for the day, with some family time. And then, then when they leave, that's when my job starts. And, and I go that's when I start my training. I break for lunch, so depending on the time of year, when it's, if the weather's good and it's winter time, like, the day's not really starting until maybe 9 a.m. If it's depending on how cold it is outside. I got to let it warm up enough for, the dogs to come out and be able to smell birds and do whatever else. And plus, it just sucks to be out there. It's 15 degrees, right? If I had 20 dogs, I'd have to be grinding it out in the 15. So there's always wiggle room on either end of my day, depending on the season. In the summertime, I need to be out there at the crack of dawn and get to
conditions, temperature,
2 or 3 good hours of work. And then that's where the companion side comes in. Is now I can kind of filter back in midday, or shoot some emails, try to make some content, do whatever. But I've got whatever individual dog happens to be out, kind of being the companion dog in that moment. So for me, it's the slowness really helps me. The fact that I don't have now deadlines are important. I got to send you home, hopefully staunch, hopefully having a nice little natural retrieve on you. You can take a gunshot, and I have a deadline. There's a timeline to that for me. But what I have worked out that, it's 6 weeks for the most part. As long as we hit the ground rolling, that's not a problem, but if we hit the ground and it takes you 2 weeks before you're comfortable in your own skin in this environment, then we got to have a conversation with your owner. But for the most part, we can draw out what we need to make a hunting dog,
Mm-hmm.
in that period of time. And so that's more than enough time for your general obedience work, and then that general compliance system for me, which is the ritual of life. It's the, hey, when you're in this room, the room we're sitting in right now is my dog, like my dog training space, my indoor kind of dog, existence space.
Your office, if a trainer had an office.
Yeah. This is a place where you come in, and if you're the dog, you're not bouncing off the wall. You might be over here sitting next to me and getting an ear scratch, but once you walk into this room, your arousal level should come down. And that's, to me, that's the context. And that's what I want from a compliance perspective. And so anytime you're unsupervised, you're isolated in a crate or in a kennel, holding run, whatever. Anytime you're semi-supervised, where I want to come in here and say, make some content or do some emails or something, I got you on a place board where we have some distance between us and you're dealing remotely and you're learning to just relax. And then if I can give you that opportunity to be out and around me in a subdued fashion, you're welcome to be loose on the ground and getting attention from me, and that's what I'm looking to send them home with. And so if I can send these clients home with a dog and they understand this is the ritual of life when they're in the house, this is the mentality that's expected of them. And if they step outside of it, then here's how we address that. And then, hey, when we step out the door and I put your e-collar on, I throw my hunting vest on, sling a gun over my shoulder, this is the mode we're in, and that's what I'm looking to achieve. And the balance is pretty easy to keep there. And it never gets old to me. I love it.
Typically, how does the follow-up work with like updates from the owners? Maybe they get home and the dog was place trained, now I hear it's not, and you're coaching them.
Yeah, and that's the one reason I really like instead of, one thing I tell my clients is like, hey, in your initial turnover, we're not going to go over a list of obedience commands. Like here he'll sit say. Like that's, chuck it out the one, do whatever. It's simple, it's easy. If you're training, like if you're willing to put a little bit of time into that, the thing that's important is the ritual of life, the general compliance, which is when I interact with you, I'm interacting with you with intent. If I can send you home with that mentality, so I spend, half of my turnover sitting in this room with my clients and their dog, putting them on the place board, putting them in a kennel or letting them be loose on the ground and get ear scratches. But the expectation is you're not crawling over my lap. You're not jumping off the walls. You're just, hey man, you got it. Like if I ask you to go on the place board, you do it immediately. And you do it not suppressed and not unhappy. You just go, okay, I can do this. That is, what I expect from that turnover. So if they go home and it backs, and what I do is I send them home with a plan. Here's 30, give me 30 days. And it's a habit building program essentially. So if you're going to, whatever rehab program you're going to go to, that 28-day mark is really important for those programs. And it's essentially because that's how we're building our neural pathways. And I look at it the same way with those dogs. So with me, the dog has already established that. We have that relationship. And so I can send them home with a couple of items. You got a crate, you got a place board, here's your space. And now you give me 30 days of doing it this way. And if you want to throw it out the window after that, that's fine. But you have a baseline to always go back to now. And so rarely do I have the client that's just like, well, they're just completely unwound. Most clients, and the ones that do come back like that just never took it seriously in the first place. You're always going to get those few, and they're fine. Like for the most part, they know that too.
I was about to say, do they actually recognize?
Yeah, rarely are they holding that against you. It's the only time I ever get that is like in that started dog game, which I hate so much. Right? It's like you can, you can take the best dog in the world and give it to somebody, and it may not be the best dog in the world for that person. So I do my best. If I'm going to sell started or finished dogs, to me, you're going to enter into hopefully a long-term relationship with me about that, because that to me is important. But as far as the client dogs are concerned, for the most part, and I also explain that to them too. Though, if you're going to bring me a dog for any of my board and train programs, you and I are kind of, shaking, and I don't do paperwork and stuff, but we're kind of entering into a covenant with one another that is, I'm with you for the long run. You ever need my help, you got it. You show back up here anytime. We get it right. We set you straight. Um, and hopefully I've got somebody that's going to be around for the remainder of that dog's life to some extent.
Mm.
So there's a lot of those now.
So there's no paperwork between you and your clients.
No.
You just handshake.
Yeah, I mean it would. Yeah, it'd kill a lot of the, especially like your business guru trainer guys out there. But I did it for a while, and then I also realized like I never had to deal with it, but I've had some friends that ended up kind of litigating some things, and it's all small claims court crap, and it's this none of that stuff's worth any more than the paper it's written on at the end of the day. And what I find personally is like if you look me in the eyes and you shake my hand and you do me dirty, then I paid for a little bit of a lesson there, and I know what not to do, which is do business with you ever again.
Yeah.
And that's fun. And
trust them when they tell you who they are.
yeah, and you just kind of and you deal like, and I mean, to me, and I've learned, I have. I mean, I've been burnt a couple of times, and that's part of life, and that's part of. It's not worth my time to take that to small claims court,
Mm-hmm.
and and I hope, if somebody feels as if I have not met my obligations, and I think this is the important thing about reputation building, and the thing that's important. If somebody's ever felt like I didn't meet my obligations, I will do everything in my power to change their mind and make it right. And I think you have to do that. You got to be the person that it hurts if you feel like you didn't meet your end of the deal.
Right.
And I think that you can't teach that. You can't. You either that's in your personality or it's not to some degree. And it does me like it. Nothing feels worse to me than if somebody's disappointed and
what you sought out to accomplish. Yeah. I'm similar to that too. It's just like if you say you're going to do it, do it to the best of your ability. And
and if I fall down, which we all do in life, like if something, if I didn't meet that, then I'll try my best to make it work for you, and I'll do that at a value to you. Like, when I say I'll take your dog on and give it to you at the end of 6 weeks for this price, like not only am I charging you for my time and expertise during that time, I'm saying I'm going to send you something home that's serviceable. And if it's not, then that's my responsibility to fix, not yours. Now, if I call you at 3 weeks in and go, well, we're having these problems and we can stop the clock now, we can do it. What do you want to do? And if you say, take them to the end and we'll see where we're at, and I don't meet my objectives at that point, then we're in a little different situation,
right.
But that's the nuance of this stuff. You can't just write that into a piece of paper and say that this is the way it's going to be. You either stand by your word or you don't stay in business long, in my opinion, in this game.
Coming from the business perspective, insurance, is there anything else that you would advise somebody considering doing this?
You got to be insured. I do it through Carolina Farm Mutual now. I think I may jump from them. I'm always looking. One thing is it's hard to, especially in the gun dog space, it's kind of hard to tie it all up in a neat little bow. I know Kennel Pro is pretty good, but if you're going to host events where there's live ammo and stuff, you need to think about those things. But just general dog training liability insurance, you got to have it. You don't, in the state of North Carolina, there's really not a whole lot outside of having a business license, which is just, once you got your EIN, you're pretty much good. My accountant handles all my, whatever needs to go to that stuff every year. But, I mean, no, outside of that, I mean, I could be homeless living out of my car and hosting group classes in a public space as long as it was legal and make a living. It's one thing I've always loved about this is like once I recognized that I was competent enough to actually sell my skills, then it was like, oh, this I can always make money for the rest of my life now. And that's, I think, a good feeling.
And that's a good thing that comes out of developing any actual true skill.
Absolutely. Yeah. It wouldn't matter if it was welding or carpentry or anything else. It's just
learn the skill and you can go apply that wherever. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't think either one of us knew that this was the route we're going to take when we hit record on this. But since we're going down the path of somebody opening up their own training service, what do we miss? I mean, what's something that we should touch on? It could be as detailed or just general as you'd like.
I think it's just different for everybody, man. I mean, like you and I both, we were talking about this earlier. We got friends that do it different ways. Nobody, the wonderful thing about life is that we are all different. And so I can't tell you how to operate your business. There are plenty of people, like I am not a numbers guy. I'm not a business guy. I look at I view myself, or at least the ideal vision of what I wanted to be doing this as a craftsman. So I look at myself as if I were, um, a one-off gun maker or, some other kind of artisan. And that's the way I try to operate my business. But I think as long as you have that vision in mind, you can be successful however you choose to operate it. There are other guys that are like, they're going to have 7 different locations at the end of 2 years,
Right.
and they're going to be grossing, 7 mil, but at the end of the day, is what you're netting worth it to you? And if it is, that's fine.
Some people are just built that way. Some
Yeah,
people like that grind.
yeah, that's not, I'm not a hustle guy. I'm not, I don't follow the business gurus and stuff like that on the social media. I'm still looking at pictures of people hunting and training dogs. Like that's
just waiting for inspiration.
Yeah, that's what I'm into, and that's all I want to be.
Well, I always enjoy these conversations. I think that's something you and I both have in common about how we go about doing things, and so appreciate you kind of, I don't know, letting us peek behind the curtain, so to speak, on how these businesses work. Because I think, again, a lot of people just assume that we're just playing with dogs all day, and
to some degree, they're not wrong.